to Fireside with Fathers. As anticipated, we have my dad on the show because there were a lot of comments asking for him after my mom was on 2 weeks ago, because I just didn't think it was fair to have mom on and dad left in the background, which I totally agree with. In my case, I am blessed with two very good parents. And my dad also has a very interesting story to tell and hopefully advice, which comes through experience, to give. So as this is going on, as we're chatting informally, if you guys are inspired to pop questions, if something comes into your head, if there's something that we're probably leaving out, just ask the question and we'll get it up there hopefully at the end. And if not, hopefully a part two. But it is good if you can get that out there. So, Dad, really do appreciate you taking the time out and finding that spot right there to come on and tell your story. So, first of all, thank you.
You're welcome.
And it's good to see you.
Thank you. This is exciting.
It is, yeah. I'm actually thinking there might be stuff that I might hear that I haven't heard. I do remember sometimes when we'd go up to Vermont and you saw that we were kind of alone with the uncles, you were kind of worried that they might be telling us stories that you didn't want us to hear. I do have a vague memory of it, but you don't, I mean, whatever you're comfortable with, obviously. But as far as your story goes, you would have grown up in a pretty decent family, good parents. What was your relationship like with your parents growing up, or your family?
Well, you might say I had a very idyllic childhood. Growing up on a small farm in Vermont, we were very Catholic in that two of my father's brothers were diocesan priests. And I asked the younger of the two brothers to tell me his vocation story once. And he said, "Oh, that's easy." He said, "I was deeply in love with my brother and respected him, and he went into the seminary. So I went into the seminary." I was expecting a deep call from Christ or an understanding for the need of salvation of mankind or something, but it was just love and reverence for the priesthood and for his brother. And my father and my mother had 11 children. I was the seventh born of 11. And I think that my father operated very much under obedience and respect to his brothers. And the fruit of that was a large family. We raised our own food for the most part. We had beef and milk from cows and chickens and slaughtered hogs and other fowl. And from the outside, it seemed very beautiful. From the inside, I felt a little bit lost, being one of 11, and in the middle, I was the referee, if you will, and I learned skills of being adaptable and compliant, and so I didn't always voice what I wanted and stick up for myself, but rather wanted peace as a personality trait. I think it was strongest.
And did you it got to a point, because I know you did at one point enter into seminary, so you're obviously not a priest, thanks be to God. But
well, well, it is a long journey there. The small town which I was part of is the home of Norwich University, which is the oldest private military academy in our country, and so I was afforded the opportunity to go there tuition free. I merely needed to pay for room and board, and so I really wanted to go to college. I had missed high school, and that's another story in itself. But I never really participated in high school, but I had a burning desire to go to college. And I went to Norwich, which is a military academy, and I wore a uniform and um, and studied at Norwich. More and more, and had a difficulty in seeing the good in life. And my very best childhood friend committed suicide when I was 20 years old, a sophomore at Norwich.
is that
And,
that was Joe Priestley, was it?
It was Joe Priestley. It was, and I had a hard time making that work in my mind, and not having a drive personal drive for anything in life. School didn't seem to make a lot of sense because it wasn't like I was working to get married and to provide for children or whatever. I was just trying to make sense of life and with no answers. And I decided that I would put all my chips on the table. And I went to a vocation director and applied to the seminary. And I really experienced the Holy Spirit in that meeting. And when we stopped talking, the vocation director and myself, he said, "You smoke cigarettes, don't you?" And I said, "I do." And he said some other things. He said, "We've just been together 2 hours and you never asked for anything. Do you know why that is?" And I said, "I really experienced God speaking with you." And in interview, he allowed me to go to the seminary. He endorsed me. And so I went to the Pontifical College Josephinum, very fancy name for a seminary in Columbus, Ohio. And the reason it's a pontifical college, the only pontifical college in North America, is because a German priest started a school for German orphans in Columbus, Ohio. And lo and behold, every one of them had a vocation. And the local bishop wouldn't sign for him to have a seminary. So he went to Rome and he got endorsed by Rome and became a pontifical seminary. And he started educating principally German young men. And so the Josephina was born in 1881. And I went there and I never found peace there. I struggled. I struggled academically because I jumped in midstream in a very rigorous academic program. I was considered junior, but I really hadn't had the elemental courses in philosophy and theology. So I was a very unhappy seminarian, and a priest came to me and he said, "Andy," he said, "you're very unhappy. What do you think will make you happy?" And I said, "I don't have a clue." And he said, "Why don't you go home and take a job doing something that you think is God's work?" So I went home and I got out the local newspaper and I went through, and here was a job working in a mental institution with developmentally disabled people. And I said, "Oh, that's got to be God's work. Nobody else would do that work. It's got to be God's work." So I took a job there. And it was a cultural shock for me. The people lived like non-people. It was a very, very awful place. But I found peace there.
In what
And I
sense?
was
In what
able to
sense was it awful, Dad? Sorry.
Since it was awful that they, in order to get attention, they would derobe. There was not their humanity was seemed to be lacking. There was a great deal of violence, a great deal of violence between clients, a great deal of violence, and the lack of true compassion from staff to the client. It was the word for it was snake pit. I mean, it was an awful experience. And I excelled there. I enjoyed it, my work very much. Instead of renting an apartment, I pitched a tent in the woods, and I would go from my work to my tent. And my prayer life was richer than it had been in a long time. And I enjoyed the work. But I had the need, I always considered to finish college imperative. It was just a thing I had to do. And so I returned to the seminary and I finished and got accepted into major seminary and spent one part of a semester there. And I just felt very strongly that I was not supposed to be there, that the wish for a vocation was born in my heart from wanting life to be perfect and wanting God to be visible to me and wanting every day to be peaceful and filled with happiness. And it wasn't there. Being in the seminary, that was not my experience. It was drudgery. Academics came very difficult to me, and I was very unhappy. So I left. And that's when I looked up your mother. I had met mom 5 years prior, that first time that I had left the seminary. And I had had a religious experience this one evening when we cared for the same woman in a hospital. I heard the Holy Spirit tell me, um, "This will be your wife." And I said, "Yeah, that's not happening. I'm finishing the seminary, and this woman has been married and has two children, and it's just, you know, nice idea." But 5 years later, we had never dated or anything, your mom and I. And the first thing I did when I left the major seminary is I went to look up mom. And she was on the fifth floor of a hospital in Burlington, Vermont, psychiatric unit, because she had had a breakdown. She had had just years ago, they'd call it a nervous breakdown, but today they call it something different. But she was in for psychiatric help. And I went to see her, and there was this very firm nurse there, and she said, "You can't see her. Nobody can see her. She's in here for evaluation, and nobody can see her." So I pulled my wallet out and I showed her my ID with the clerics on, had a little Roman collar for being in the major seminary. And I said, "I am her spiritual director, and she needs to see me." And so the lady said, "You're not a spiritual director." I was 25 years old, and or 24 years old actually at this point, and I don't think I looked much like a spiritual director. And so I went in, and mom was so shocked to see me. And I said, "Gail, what are you doing? What's wrong?" And she said, "I just can't do life. It's just things are just crashed." And so I gave her the first kiss. I kissed her on the forehead, and I said, "Everything's going to be okay. Everything's going to be okay." And she was released from the hospital a week or so later, and I helped her move down to her parents' hometown, her parents where they lived, and we started dating, and we were married some 8 months later,
Oh,
and the
wow.
rest is history, as they say.
And so from there, you so you started, I guess, what would be a path of openness to life, obviously, because after that, 12 children came. Um, is that something that you had an idea of planning and organizing, or what's the story there? Is that just something that was it's just a natural way of life?
No, it was not employing any church teachings. It was not because I was well educated in what would become known as John Paul II's theology of the body or anything else. Just in the truth of it is, I found Gail to be incredibly beautiful and attractive, and she was my best friend. And we fought the day together every day, and then we went to bed, and life came. And I would never have thought or entertained, and I don't think Gail would have either, that we would try to do something mechanical to stop the natural rhythm of what we felt called to do, was to really love each other, because we're both coming from some brokenness, and we were, very open with that with each other, and that was our greatest solace in life, was to be together, was to be together.
We were
So
talking with, I mean, the last time we were with mom, we were mentioning stuff in Antrim, just our old, well, would have been my first house, but it was the fixer upper, really, like that. You just, you saw it and you had the vision and you fixed it up. What was your experience living there? Because my experience was, if I can remember well, I think it was 8 years. I think I was there until I was about 8. But I have nothing but really, I do have good memories of the place. You guys would probably have different memories. Mom did mention the heat, and I guess I do remember, like, we would have to go around the vent. There's a vent down in the dining room where the heat would come out. We did. I mean, we wouldn't be eating as well as I think some of the kids would be eating now. But I still don't remember anything really like extreme frugality. But how would you experience, like, I don't know, Providence in that sense? Because you would have a better mind or eye for that than myself. Because, like I said, I wouldn't remember. But, like, how do we make it by in those years?
I was, without knowing it, unbeknownst to me, I was poster child for living on God's providence, um, because I was a human service worker that made very little money, and I had a love and an inclination for construction. I always enjoyed carpentry and construction, but it didn't. It wasn't. You couldn't count on it. In New England, in New Hampshire, in the winter, things always got very slow. And in our first decade of marriage, there were two major recessions in the economy, and uh, construction and the that field did not offer health insurance. And when we bought our own health insurance, it was $1,000 a month, and we couldn't afford it. And when I worked human services, they paid nothing, but at least there was benefits. So we were living on almost nothing. And mom always did such a good job. She tried to do little things to help. And we very humbly went to the Protestant church because they had a really uh, wealthy food pantry. And we would get what we called army food. And you guys didn't really like some of it. But we got army food.
I do
And
remember the meatballs with the peas that Joseph loved
yeah,
those. I couldn't stand the green peas and meatball. I don't remember them. I do remember
but
that though. I don't know. I did not like that one.
people were always good to us. And I remember one Christmas in particular, I took on a second job and cut Christmas trees down for this Christmas tree farmer so that we could have a Christmas, to generate some extra money for gifts. And then he let me cut trees that he didn't consider good enough to sell, not marketable trees. And we placed them in front of our house in the snow, and we advertised them with a sign. And that Christmas, we ended up selling so many of those second trees, and we bought so many lovely gifts and put the angel on the top of our tree. Uh, how what was that? To buy an angel for the top of the tree instead of a gift for a child. But things like that always happen for us. They always happen for us. We received money anonymously. I remember receiving an envelope with $1,000 in it, not knowing who would give that to us, but it was just in the nick of time. Our bank lady was always kind to us, and she signed us up for this new mortgage that you paid every 2 weeks instead of it once a month, to help us save on interest. But little did she know we'd be 4 days late every mortgage payment, which made us 52 times late in 1 year, or 26 times late in 1 year. Uh, so that wasn't very healthy for us, but we just hung on. We just hung on, but we never let stress run us in that way. It did get very hard at the end of the month when we had to pay bills, and we were the working poor, very unjustly, that we got late fees on everything. So we had to actually come up with more money to be poor than people that were able to pay their bills on time. And that we ran like that until the house fire. And blessed be God and thanks be to Saint Joseph. Uh, I had this statue given to me by this young man. He was about my age, and he had a very powerful job, and he made a lot of money, but he had a hard time with his two kids. And he would watch us come into church, and at that time there were about 8 of us, 9 of us, children, and he was just so touched. He bought me this cement statue of Saint Joseph, about 3 feet tall, and he said, only Saint Joseph could take care of a family like yours, Andy. And I see Saint Joseph in you. And I was really touched. And I took that statue and I put it on this stump that was in front of our home. And I pointed it toward our front door. And I prayed and I begged Saint Joseph to watch over our home. And about a week later, 2 weeks later, um, we were coming home from church. We pulled into our driveway. And I noticed that the statue of Saint Joseph was turned. It was turned about 40 degrees toward our kitchen window. And so I said, okay, that's it. Nobody gets out of the van. Not going in for Sunday brunch. Nobody's getting out of the van until somebody fesses up playing with my Saint Joseph. That's my Saint Joseph. And you guys were all just stayed in the van and you started whining. And finally, Mom said, Dad, I think this is really unreasonable. I don't think anybody touched St. Joseph. I said, I know somebody touched St. Joseph. So we get out, and a few days later, at 2 o'clock in the morning, our house catches on fire and burns. And St. Joseph was looking precisely at where the fire started. And so that was a moment that really changed our lives because we were able to get out from under an oppressive mortgage, and we moved to our present home. I've been there 27 years in Munsonville, and we were unable to find a house to rent. So a gentleman that I bought land from let us rent this 1,000 square foot cottage in the middle of the woods, and I ran a telephone line through the woods and connected it so we would have telephone. That was one of Mom's requirements. But the story I'm coming to that I find very, very important is that we had to leave that house for 2 weeks because they had it rented for 2 weeks in the summer, in the end of June. And we had never been on a vacation as a family. We'd never had the money. So we packed up everybody into the van. Mom had a huge bowl of chili made so we could eat on the road. And we went to Marmora, Canada, where it was purported that the Blessed Mother was appearing on a farm at the tent station, and that these people had gone to Medjugorje and they had returned and they had received some visions and they turned their farm into a pilgrim center, a prayer center. And it had been going on for a couple of years, and some famous people came and blessed it. I remember Joseph Torilla. He was a famous guy that was tortured by the communists, and he has a book out and talks about his torture. But he went there, and I had read his book, and I was very interested. It was only about 5 hours from our house, a drive. So we decided to vacation up in Marmora, and we went up to Marmora, and we had this bowl of chili, $400, 10 children at the time, and I'm planning on spending 2 weeks. I'd never been on vacation before, but $400 was a lot of money. So we spent 5 days up there, and I had $60 left, and it cost about $70 for gas. So I said to Mom, I said, we got to go home, and we don't have a place to stay. We'll just stay with your parents. And we decided to go to the pilgrimage site one more time. And I got to the tent station, and I remember kneeling down, and I said to Our Lady, I said, we've practiced poverty a long time. I think we've done pretty well with it. Tried not to complain too much. And I'm not that good of a provider, and I appreciate your help as well. But if you could help us out here, I'd really appreciate it. And if we didn't have to fight this hard just to eat going forward, it'd be helpful. And that was the extent and the depth of my prayer. And so we went to get into the van, and I noticed that the gift center was open. St. Joseph's gift shop was open. And so I said, I'm just going to go in and look. I've got $60 to my name. And Mom says, you're not going in there. I said, I'm just going to go in and look. She said, you never just look. You're not to be trusted. You're not going in there. I said, I'm going to go and look. So I go into the gift shop and walk around, and there's this statue, this marble statue of
Just we just lost this. We lost the sound there. So hold on. We're gonna try to get the sound back. 2 seconds. Yeah, all of a sudden there was just all the everything kind of just went down. So just pray a Hail Mary here and hopefully get back on board. Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou among women, And blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus. Holy Mary, Mother of God and our Mother, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death. Amen. So it's to be expected a bit. I think you were getting into the best story actually. It just went off when you went into the gift shop. So I know the rest of the story, but we're gonna hopefully wait till we get the sound back and you get the story. So that's, I guess, expected sometimes with these technical kinks. We do pray beforehand, but then always something goes wrong. The poor brother Christian, because he would have had everything set up, and then all of a sudden something weird happens and it all goes out. So hopefully we can get that figured out. In the meantime, if you guys do have questions, you can write them up. It is too bad because we're just getting into we're getting into a good part. But and if there's anybody listening that thinking up to this point, my parents have had like an ideal situation as far as Catholics go. It's not the case. There has been hardship and there has been struggle. Mentioned the house fire. Our microwave blew up. I think it was at 3:00 in the morning when it exploded, and you had providentially put in a fire escape as well, which I never did get the full story, which is too bad you can't respond because it would be nice to hear. But the fire escape in the back was actually where we all ran out, because we were on the 3rd floor when the fire came, and we ran down at like middle of the night and right into the smoke. And thanks be to God, my older brother was there to have the sense to pull us back out, and we ended up going out the back on the fire escape that my dad had recently put in. So if it wasn't for that fire escape, we probably would have been burnt up. So that was So what we're gonna have to try to do is hopefully maybe, Dad, what we'll do is probably hang up and then call back, and then hopefully if you answer, it will hopefully we'll be all back on. Okay, so he's gonna. Okay, I thought it was all gonna hang up. So, anyways, I'll just keep going with that story. So the fire escape was providentially put in, and we went down it, and the house ended up just completely going up in flames. It was a freak accident. They don't know exactly why it blew up. There was a potential lawsuit there as well. The insurance company said that we could have sued the Japanese company that made the microwave, but my parents opted off, just saying that we'll just get whatever possessions were in the house, the worth off of them from the insurance company, and we'll be fine with that. But I think it could have been a lot because it was a liability, and the microwave was a freak accident. It exploded. But it was another part of the journey that I think my parents have been going on. Things that have, like, I wouldn't have been conscious of growing up with it, but now looking back, you can see the hand of God. My dad said he was a poster child for providence. It was so real in my parents' life that it actually strengthened their faith. So like, you do have very hard moments. That $1,000 check that came in the mail, that did come after, like, we couldn't pay anything. Like, the bills were just overwhelming, and it was an anonymous check in the mail, and it was exactly what they needed to get by, to get through. And the idea of having a large family and being open to life, but at the same time knowing that God is your father, and that if he takes such good care of creatures like a sparrow, will he not take good care of you who are his child? So it has been very, very real and present in our lives, the providence. And it's something that my parents would always tell us, that fortunately enough, I wouldn't have had the ears to hear it back then, but now I do look back and I do see how incredible it is. But people who would not be able to relate to my parents because of the big family, you can relate to the hardships. Like, you could have 2 children in your family and be finding it very hard, with the husband, with the kids, rearing them. And then you can say, like, well, they had 14, and like, it's just that this, I don't know, amazing experience of God's presence in their life. It was a battle. Like, it wasn't very, like, smooth sailing the whole time. My parents did come into, like, some very, tough circumstances, but what you can relate to them is this trust in God. I think at the end of the day, like if you do open yourself and trust in Him, He is going to provide. And then there's the families that want to do the Catholic thing. You know, they want to be open to life, have a whole bunch of kids, because you know that's the Catholic thing. Like I said, I think my mom mentioned that in her when she was on. You know, there was parents that were just like felt like it was almost like I'm Catholic and I have to have a huge family. And then sometimes they find themselves, I don't know, drowning, or it's just too much, or it's chaos, and it's very rough going. So with those families, I mean, I'm not saying like, you know, close yourself off to life, but do open yourself up, obviously, to God in your life and the providence. And it's not about, I don't think it's about just, you know, like uh, you know, sometimes they think like, oh, I have to have so many kids and it's going to be very hard, but that's just the cross that the Lord has for me. I wouldn't agree with that myself. In my parents' case, they didn't have all the kids, like my dad mentioned, because this is the law of the church. My parents would be ones, you know, that were just madly in love with each other, and they saw life as adventurous, and every life that came in, every child that was born for them, it was a new explosion of a new beginning. So they did see it at that point of view. So what I would say is like, if you don't see life like that, you know, like as something that is adventurous and from God, and open yourself up to something that He's in control of and He's going to take care of, I would discern it, and maybe even get a good spiritual director and ask him, you know, like, is this for us? Because a large family is a vocation. Yeah, not all Catholics are called to have 14 kids. It is a calling, and it is a vocation that, you know, you have to be called to do it. So, I mean, I would just, you know, maybe examine the intentions there too at the time of having a family, you know, like discern and see if this is for you, if this is God's will, and don't just go at it as, well, look, I'm Catholic, it's the Catholic thing, it's the law, and I'm going to do it. And then you find yourself kind of swamped and incapable. If you do find yourself swamped and incapable and a lot of kids, it's still fine. And God obviously smiles on that, and He is going to look after you. And like I always say, like at the end of the day, you know, the what you learn in a big family, there's stuff in there that you couldn't learn out in the real world. I remember in college, just a lot of my buddies, like they would, you know, some things that I knew or I had picked up, or an awareness that I had, they would always ask me if it was something I learned, or like I had a knife or something. And I never knew how to answer them. And looking back on it now and looking at some of my other brothers and what they're doing, it is something that you can really only learn in that environment. You can only learn like certain skills, even on a human level, growing up with that, you know, like the responsibility. If mom's gone, dad's gone, you got to babysit. You're 12 years old. You got to learn how to cook, obviously clean, you know, because you can't have that many and, you know, have a chaotic house. If you do, like, look, maybe it's time that we have to start reorganizing a bit and really disciplining the kids to do the chores, because, you know, a lot of times people think, oh, it's justifiable because there's so many kids, the house is going to be a mess, you know, or like people could be like, well, my house is always trashed, you know, it's impossible. And I come home and it's just like extremely stressful. You know, there are ways, you know, like you got to really educate and train the kids, and it's not easy, but, you know, get the kids to start vacuuming, get them to pick up, even cooking. You could give them a little bit of freedom and trust them in there. It goes bad in the beginning, but then it ends up being okay. You know, really get them involved, and that's a super, you know, huge effort, and everybody has to pitch in. If not, it's not going to work. And the story my dad was actually telling, which I don't know if he's going to come back to tell it. We're going to have to see, hopefully, as we were going on our way back from Canada. And like he said, he had 60 bucks, and it wasn't really even enough to get back home. And the last thing you want to do is go into a religious gift shop with the money that you really needed to put into your tank. And he went in, and this marble statue of Our Lady he saw, and he was completely enamored and fell in love with it. And he asked the owner how much, and it was a ridiculous price, extremely expensive. And my dad ended up offering him, you know, a significantly amount less. And she said, no way. So he basically started walking out of the store. He walked out, And the owner saw that he was going back into the van with all the kids. I think it was a guilt trip that they felt. They ended up giving him the statue, and then they ended up giving him, I think it was like, I don't know if it was $400 or $500 in his pocket. And so he ended up going in and coming out of the gift store with the statue and loads of money to make it back home and to treat us all to a good meal. So that was like that was one of the stories he was going to tell, and it was also going to bridge into another one. But anyways, look, there's no response here on the other end, so I don't. It's too bad. So I guess it's gonna have to be another. We're gonna have to repeat this one, guys. For all you who are following, if there were any questions up there, I can probably start going at them. But it looks like this is gonna have to hopefully be another part 2. This is something we've seen. We've come across this in our apostolate with media. Sometimes you can have everything perfect, and some kink happens or something goes, and sometimes it's pretty clear that could be an attack. Like, this could be something that, maybe someone had to hear, needed to hear, words of encouragement. My dad was going to get into talking about suffering and fatherhood, which is something that he holds very close to his heart, because he, before actually preparing the talk, he was thinking, that he is just basically a failure, and that he hasn't really done anything right in life, and he didn't feel like he could come on and speak because of that. And that was something that he had kind of a conviction in his heart that was the truth. And after about a day struggling with that, he came to the conclusion that everything he had heard, that whole train of thought, it was true. that he was a failure and a disaster. And that's exactly where the Lord wanted him as far as his consciousness. That, you are weak, you are, a disaster, and without me, there's no future. And so he had this kind of, it's an experience that, it's something that my dad, would be very sensitive to. So he says, well, like, look, it's true. And obviously you're the savior. And without you, I'm nothing. I'm lost. So with you, let's do it. And so from the brokenness, and from like the kind of feeling like, sometimes even like, a letdown or useless, there is life that comes from it. So if it's something that he wouldn't have said, I'll say it myself too, that, my dad, as a man or as a father, probably my adolescence, I would have been a bit more, I'd say, ashamed. The whole idea of having a big family as well, it's not something that I thought was normal or cool, and it was embarrassing. You're going to bring a friend home to the house, and it's just going to be like, man, I wouldn't do it, just because I was, I was embarrassed of where I came from and who my parents were. But my dad especially, just because, I don't know, I did take it out on him, because he was the one who would also bring in handicapped people. So my mom mentioned that we had a handicapped person living with us. As far as I can remember, there always were, somebody with a disability in our house, either severely disabled or mildly, mostly severely. And my dad had a weak spot for them. So my dad would always take them in, and he would love them like no one really could ever have loved them. It's something that he has, and it's his vocation. It's really who he is, and that kind of got to me. I didn't like that, and I didn't respect that. I wish my dad could have been normal. I wish he, why is he with disabled people? This is weird. But looking back on it now, I think it's the most admirable thing that I've ever come across in my life. And I say it with complete conviction. And from that conviction, that my dad is, for me, is a hero. And as far as men go, he's the manliest man. He's the fatherliest father that I have come across. And when I have to tell my vocation, I have to tell my story, it has to stem from who my dad is and what he transmitted to me. So it's something that you wouldn't see that in the world. In the world, it is kind of a disaster, especially the lads that are success and going out there. You cleaning a severely disabled woman after she's messed herself. There's no glory in that. There's nothing spectacular about that. And the amount of times I've seen my dad do that, I wouldn't even be able to count them. And looking back that now with the eyes of faith,